Alright, so this is a review for Stephen King's The Dark Tower, The Wind Through the Keyhole, which is also known as The Dark Tower 8, or The Dark Tower 4.5, taking place in between Wizard and Glass and Wolves of the Kala, since this seems to be a bit of a tweener story, and a prequel story, and a story within a story within a story type of deal. Sounds confusing, but bear with me, I'll explain the logic of it shortly. Alright, this basically, as I said, takes place with Roland and his quartet in between books 4 and 5. Apparently, when the Dark Tower series was written, King wrote the first 4 books, and it was very authentic, and it flowed well, and the constant readers like myself got to enjoy it. When he got to the latter 3 books of the Dark Tower series, he tried to rush it out as fast as it could, and we as the readers kind of suffered for it because in his haste to finish the series, his style kind of took many steps back, and it suffered. Although there still were some parts to enjoy from those books. This one, however, is a drastic change in King's style, unlike anything that I've read from him in the past. The Dark Tower Went Through a Keyhole is meant to tell 3 different stories. What's happening with our quartet? Now, the quartet is in this book only for about 35 pages. The first 30 before they start flashback number 1, and at the final 5 pages of the book, trying to bridge the gap in between Wolves of the Kala and Wizard and Glass. The bridging doesn't work too well with me because I was given the hint that there was a longer indication of time that had passed in between both of those books, and this seems to round it up as just being, oh, well, it wasn't really that far that they had to go to reach Caliber and Sturgis, which was slightly annoying to me, because if the way that this book was written was pretty good, so I assumed that there could be other stories that could have filled up the gap, but I wouldn't have minded if they were written as well as what this was. So, Roland and his quartet in the present time is bland to me. And they have to take shelter from Midworld's version of a hurricane which is coming through, which case in point leads us to our flashback story. Roland and a companion of his named Jamie DeCurry. This is taking place in Roland's teenage years after him meeting Susan Delgado in Magis and fighting the Good Man's guys, and then after he killed his mother. Roland's father sends him and Jamie to investigate a skin man which has shown up in this town and has been slaughtering many farm families. The skin man is sort of a Midworld's version of a werewolf, although it can change into any type of animal that it wants to. The phenomenon is kind of hinted at a little bit about how it happens, so we kind of harken back a little bit to Desperation, a little bit. I'm going to say the part with the Skin Man, because it's also split off into 2 halves, and then we have the Wind Through the Keyhole story, which is actually a book that was read to Roland by his mother, which is told in the dead center of this. I'll get to that story in a second. Now, the flashback with the Skin Man stuff, it's alright. There is not really a twist ending on it. Well, there is kind of, but the twist is there was no foreshadowing of it. It's just one of those out of left field type of twists that they have at the end of the story, which is given. And we only see the Skin Man at the end of the story, and the battle with him is very brief. It was interesting, but it was very brief. Then we get to the Wind Through the Keyhole story, which starts out really slow. Now, mind you, this book is 300 pages, which I was surprised at how short this was for a Dark Tower novel. But King told this roughly in about maybe 120 pages, and it's really good. While this was, Roland said this was a fictional story that was read to him, I buy it as reality, because Flag shows up in that story under the guise of somebody else, as he usually does, but he shows up in there. And there's this young boy named Tim Kells who is mourning the loss of his father, thanks to him being killed by a dragon, or so according to his father's best friend is what happens. And while Tim is mourning his father's loss, his mother is looking for uh, some way to get by, because every year the Covenant man comes along and he collects taxes, and if you don't have taxes to pay him at the annual time that he comes around, your house and everything will be taken from you. So she marries the father, or the best friend of Tim's father, who actually winds up having it showed that the story that he thought he was told about his father's death does not wind up being truth. And the time that he spends living under his roof, he and his mother suffer for it. And the Flag character offers him a chance to, well, Flag is under the guise of the Covenant man, but the Covenant man offers him a way to exact revenge or learn the truth behind a very bad secret that his stepfather was keeping. And when he finds it, thanks to the Covenant man's machinations, this winds up resulting in something very bad for his mother. And Tim sort of is made to go on a quest and sort of has a young trial of manhood at the age of 11 or 12. And the story, it kind of seems like it drags a little bit, but as it gets going and going towards its conclusion, it's really, really good. It's not really so much of a gunslinger tale, but in a way, sort of Tim's test of manhood into becoming a pseudo gunslinger himself, and it's really, really well written. Now, I understand that Jay Lee, who does the art on the Marvel Comics version of the Dark Tower, was supposed to be doing illustrations in this. The copy I bought from Walmart did not have the illustrations in there, so I'm probably going to have to track this picture that you see down somewhere else, because that is the version that I do not have. So that's just really something I'm wanting to get my hands on. But the middle ground of the story within the story, went through a keyhole, the chapter track, or the title chapter, is really, really well done. And then when we get into the outer layers of the onion, it kind of is hit or miss. The Skin Man stuff is alright, but when we get to the end with Roland and his quartet, they're bland in the present time on the outer layers of this book. But I will say that there is something that is taken from the end of the Skin Man, which really is beneficial to Roland about his mother. And when it's kind of a moment that's shared in between Roland and Susanna at the end of the story, it's like, it's very small, but in the same time, it's a massively soul-fulfilling piece of information to help us further appreciate Roland's character and give deeper insight into him, besides the caring yet still obsessed about the tower type of guy that he became in the latter 3 books of the series. Overall, with this book, I would say that it's really good if you enjoy the Dark Tower series. If you're obviously wanting to get into the Dark Tower series, this is not the place to start. You want to go back with a gunslinger. I would not recommend reading this in between books 4 and 5. Save it until after you've read Dark Tower 7. Because there's some things that this book still kind of allude to that they have to face in the future, and it would be massive spoilers, although not as massively spoilerish as what the Gunslinger 2.0 was, but it's still pretty good. But overall, I recommend this book. It's a terrible bridge in between Wizard and Glass and Wolves of the Calla to me, because it kind of throws off some of the continuity, but the very high points of the story will make this book well worth the purchase.